Hello, everyone, and welcome. Thank you so much for attending Solution Focused Brief Therapy, Building Good Questions in Session. My name is Denise Marshall, and I'm the Business Development Coordinator over here at Therapy Sites, and we are so honored to have all of you here today. Today, we have our special guest speaker, Elliott, and he is with us from Keller, Texas. He is a psychotherapist as well as the founder and the executive director of the Connie Institute, which is an organization that conducts training for clinicians who are interested in using the solution-focused approach with couples, as well as developing training materials and conducting research. And he is also the new executive director of the newly found Association for Solution-Focused Practitioners. So we're really honored to have Elliott with us today. I did want to let you know that at the end of the webinar, we're going to be doing a live Q&A session. So if you could take a moment and look at the control panel on your screen, and on that control panel, you'll see a little section called questions. At any time you have any questions during today's session, please type those into there and we'll try to answer as many of those as we can at the end. Also, after the webinar has concluded, we will be doing a quick survey. So if you could please just take a couple of minutes and answer 5 quick questions, and we'd love to hear your feedback. All right, so now that we got all of that out of the way, I'm going to hand this over to Elliott. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And well, first of all, I'm really excited to be here. I really enjoy talking about solution-focused brief therapy. Obviously, I travel around the world doing lectures about this approach. This particular workshop and/or topic is among my favorite to do because solution-focused brief therapy is a hard methodology to learn how to practice. And one of the things that makes it so difficult to learn how to practice is most of the time, and this was certainly my experience in graduate school, but most of the time we teach solution-focused brief therapy as a collection of techniques. So most people are familiar with scaling questions, the miracle question, exception finding, so on and so on. Oops, sorry. So on and so on. But solution-focused brief therapy is much more than that. And we have to be able to know how to build these questions in the actual session. So that's what today's focus will be, is how to actually build questions in session and use this actually with your clients. So to accomplish this, I'm going to talk a little bit about why we ask the questions we do, and I'm going to show video of me doing this, having these sorts of conversations. So I'll say something really quick about the video and the PowerPoint as well. The PowerPoint will be made available to everybody, so you don't have to worry about that. And about the videos, I'm going to use 2 videos that are actually, they were produced, they're published videos. When I do trainings, I typically use videos of me working with real, actual clients from my practice. But because of the nature of this event being on the internet and being recorded and being dispersed, I'm not going to be able to do that. So I have 2 videos, that have been published. One of them is me working with a client, and the other one is one of my colleagues named Adam working with a client. Now, the way these clients came to be is Adam and I teach, is Dr. Adam Frower. Adam and I teach a lot together, and we were in Denver, and there were 2 students on our workshop who really were quite interested in solution-focused brief therapy, and they wanted to ask us a lot of questions, but what would you do if such and such, or what would you do with such and such? So what we decided to do was ask those people to be clients and put me and Adam in those situations so they could see how we would ask the questions. So those are the videos that we're going to watch today. And if anybody wants those videos, you can get them at elliotspeaks.com. Just click on videos, and there's it's less than $20, so it's a small fee. But I was talking to the people at Therapy Sites, and I'm going to try to get that either free or at a really reduced rate so that you guys can have the video. It's very important that people that attend my trainings and people that attend or get the material that I offer actually learn how to use solution-focused brief therapy. So I want to make as many things available to you as possible to do that. And if you haven't already done so, you might want to join my mailing list, also at elliotspeaks.com, because I'm very, very frequently and often giving out things and communicating with people in a way to help them learn and practice about solution-focused brief therapy. And then also I will say, as she mentioned, I've recently agreed to be the executive director of the Association for Solution-Focused Practitioners. And you can see the website there, theasfp.com. And if you go there, you'll see the awesome services and things that you can access to become more keen on solution-focused brief therapy, and how to learn it, make it be a part of your practice, and resources to hone your skills and that sort of thing. So without further ado, we'll start talking about how to actually build these questions in session. But the way I want to start is with this idea that language creates reality. Adam and I were teaching in Florida. This actually happened last summer, but we were teaching in Florida, and there was a young lady in the workshop, in the training we were doing, that was a neurosurgeon or a medical doctor specializing in the brain. And we were showing videotape, as Adam and I customarily do. We were showing videotape of what this looked like in practice. And at the end of the training, she came up to us. Now, Adam and I had never thought, I mean, I'm almost embarrassed to admit this now, but being a psychotherapist for this long, we had never really thought how the brain is responding to questions like this. And this doctor approached us at the end of the training and said, when you're asking questions like this, when you get such specific detail and you hit the different senses, it actually awakens different parts of the brain and causes the client to almost experience it. And we were just shocked. And you'll see what I mean when I say when you ask questions and hit the different senses, right? I mean, most people are familiar with the miracle question. Suppose you went to sleep one night, a miracle happened, and you woke up the next day. Well, we would ask questions like, what would you first see? What would you smell? What would it feel like? What would you touch? That sort of thing. So all of the senses are being kind of awoken. And that has sparked such passion in Adam and I that we're really excited that this year, later on, we're going to have the opportunity to do therapy with people wearing the actual sensor cap. I'm sure you guys have seen that kind of looks like a skull cap kind of thing with the sensors on it, so we can see how the brain is actually responding to these questions. Because we do know that language does, in fact, create reality, right? And here's why. Your brain is it's neuroplasticity, so the neurons are constantly linking in new ways. This is the way we learn and the way we learn to handle new situations. Every new piece of information your brain encounters, you have to create a neuron associated with that skill. Now, new pathways become stronger the more they're used. So this is why, like, I'm sure most of you are familiar with Malcolm Gladwell's book, 10,000 Hours. Anything you do once, you just have one little neural pathway. But if you do it 10,000 times, it becomes stronger and stronger and stronger, right? And as these pathways develop, a collective group becomes formed, and it's almost like a map to how the individual thinks and remembers. And each time they access the stored data, it's almost like reusing the pathway. So this is why psychotherapy is effective, because we can use language to access the stored data and cause people to almost re-experience it in real time just with words. Like, for example, I was in South Africa last week, and it was a really incredible trip for me. I got to do some pretty amazing things. I was there to teach, but I went on a safari and did some other cool things. And when people ask me to show them pictures, I'm accessing the file in my brain, and I can almost feel this euphoric thing wash over me because of how wonderful the trip was. I can re-experience it in real time. Now, we know that this is true with people who experience a trauma, for example, right? Most people, and as we all know, most people who experience a trauma don't want to come to psychotherapy because they feel like the therapist is going to ask them about the trauma, and describe the painful event in such a way that they have to re-experience it, and people don't want to go through that. So they tend to be therapy aversive. But solution-focused brief therapy is going to use that same phenomenon, but the other side of it. We're going to use it positively, because we're going to ask people to not describe traumatic events. We're going to ask them to describe hopeful events, things they want in their future, past successes, those types of things, so we can reawaken those positive things, right? And here's an analogy. Adam likes to tell this story, so I'm going to borrow it from him. But what we mean when we say the neural pathways become stronger the more you use them. So if I'm walking through a path in the forest, and let's say I happen upon a cabin, like what you see down in the bottom picture there, and I walk into the cabin, and I see, sorry, I got a little bit of a cold, and I see inside the cabin a series of books. Now, anybody that knows me knows I love to read. I'm a voracious reader. I read everything, everything, everything. So if I walk into this cabin and I see a series of books, just one book after another, I'm going to be really, really excited because I get to read them. Now, let's say in our hypothetical scenario here that my parents, they don't like books. I can't bring them home. So every day I wake up and I walk to this cabin to read more books. Each time I walk that path, I'm kind of carving more footprints through the path, making the pathway more and more like a highway. And if I do that every day for a year, the pathway is going to be really well, nice and worn, and much more accessible for me to walk through it. Well, the same is true with these neural pathways in our brains. Every single time we give our brain new data and we access that data, it fires and it makes it much more easily accessible. Now, I'm going to go through this pretty quickly because I don't want to bore you and I want to get to the questions. But the parts of the brain that we were talking about accessing, they each control different pieces of your senses, like the frontal lobe with smell and the occipital lobe with vision. And we want to ask our clients questions that highlight all of these things, so we're in essence having a conversation with our client's entire brain. So as I start showing you videotape and I start talking about how to actually build these questions, I want you to notice how we focus on such small details that it's going to awaken the client's senses and cause them to be able to participate in this conversation that absolutely forms and accesses neural pathways. So I already talked about kind of more is better. The more you do it, the stronger the pathway becomes established. So because we only have such a short amount of time, I'm going to talk to you really about 3 types of questions and how they build on each other. Remember, when I was taught solution-focused brief therapy, it was like a collection of techniques just kind of randomly cobbled together. But what we've realized is the more you build these questions together, the more effective they're going to be, and the more easily the questions are going to be answerable to your client. So the first thing we're going to do is what we call establish a contract. We're going to figure out a purpose for the conversation. Now, that purpose needs to be led by the client, and it's got to be about the outcome, not the strategy. And what I mean by that is most people come to therapy with a strategy for how they think they need to be helped. So if I say, what are your best hope from our conversation, they're going to tell me, you need to fix my husband. But that's their strategy. My strategy for fixing my situation, my husband needs to stop doing A, B. Excuse me, told you I'm trying to get a little cold. Is my husband needs to stop doing A, B, or C thing. Excuse me, they always come in pairs. My husband needs to stop doing A, B, or C thing. But we want to know, if your husband stopped doing those things, what would be different in your life to help us get to the outcome? And it assumes the client is motivated. When you use the solution-focused approach, we're never going to describe our clients as unmotivated, not ready for change, not ready for the conversation. Our clients came to therapy, so we're going to treat them like they're motivated people. And solution-focused brief therapy and this contracting process is about the presence of something and not the absence of something. So we're very interested in what will be there. Now, most people are so focused on the problem that they spend a lot of time thinking about the problem being removed and not so much what would be in its place. So if I ask most clients, what are your best hopes for talking? Very often they'll say things like, we wouldn't be fighting anymore, we wouldn't be depressed, we wouldn't be upset, and we want to know what would be happening instead. And it requires absolutely no understanding about the problem. As a clinician, during this process, this establishing a contract process, I don't need to know anything about the client's actual problem. So I'm going to play a video. Try to, as you listen to this video, try to get in an environment that's pretty silent so that you can hear what's being said. There's really no way to make sound stream really, really strongly. So I'm going to turn my volume up way up and make sure that you guys can hear it as best you can, but try to remove all kind of distracting noises and hopefully be able to hear it pretty good. But like I said, even if you cannot hear it too well, it's available for you online, and I'm going to try to make it available to you for free. All right, so I want you to just listen to the first couple of minutes of this conversation. You're going to hear me establishing a contract with a client, and then I'm going to play another video of Adam establishing a contract with his client as well.
Hello. Hey there. Your name? I'm Steve. I'm Elliott. Elliott. So, what are your best hopes for talking? I guess I wouldn't feel so bad every day. I have a lot of medical issues. I've been really sick for a while. Okay. How would you rather feel? Just not so sick all the time. And instead of sick, you'd rather feel? Better. Good. And how would you know you were feeling better? Good. How would you know? Like, what would be a sign to you that this better, good was happening? I wouldn't wake up every morning kind of vomiting, I guess. What would you be doing instead? I'd have more energy when I got out of bed. Okay. Okay. So if somehow, not sure how, but if somehow our talking helped this better, good, waking up with energy happening, you'd be pleased because I would we had met. Yes, yes. Awesome. Okay.
Okay, so I'll pause it there. One of the things I want to highlight is a lot of times, and this is one of those situations, the client is coming to therapy. This client is, this person is struggling with a terminal illness, and clients come to therapy wanting something that the therapist really can't provide. Like, this client wants to not have the terminal illness, and that's not within my job description. It's not within my capabilities. It's not what I'm able to do. So we have to make sure whatever we contract on is something that falls within my job description. And I can talk to him about feeling better, good, and about having more energy, because those are things that I can actually help him with. The other thing, too, is I want you to notice how closely, as a clinician, I'm trying to use his exact language. It's very, very important as you build questions, you build them in an answerable way to the client. And one of the ways to ensure that is to use their words in the construction of your questions. So I'll play another example of this process with Adam.
It's nice to meet you.
Hi.
Hi. What's your name?
Susie.
Susie. Nice to meet you. My name's Adam.
Nice to meet you.
Do you mind just telling me basically what your ideal outcome is today?
Well, I know I'm having some depression issues, and I also some anger issues, and I just recently moved to a new school, and so I feel really nervous about that, and I feel like I'm being outcasted just because it's a new school. It's, you know, my junior year, and I don't really know how to deal with everything, and I just have outbursts, and I'm not happy, and I hold resentment towards my parents because I'm moved, and all my friends are somewhere else. So I don't know.
Okay, that's a lot. If we did a nice job here today, and you walked out of here and said that was really worthwhile, how would you know? What would we have done? What would we have done during the session to make it useful?
I think probably solutions to how to control how I'm feeling.
Okay.
And, like if I do get depressed, what can I do to not feel that way, and how to control my outbursts, I think, and maybe see how I can mend things with my parents.
Okay. So if we had a conversation that led you to kind of thinking about brainstorming, okay, when I feel depressed, when I feel overwhelmed, what might I do? When I feel like my parents are kind of coming at me, how do I manage that? If we have that kind of conversation, you would say, okay, that was good. I'm glad I went.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so the thing I want to point out about that video clip is very often clients come into our office really, really focused on the problem, and with good reason. Two words that I want to be very, very clear that we're very careful with are the words can't and want to. People often ask us questions like, but what do you do when the client wants to talk to you about the problem? Well, we're very careful with the word want, because the client typically is going to talk to us about the problem because a couple of reasons. Number one, they think as the clinician we need to know it. And number two, they're so focused on the problem, they really don't know how to do anything else. So in this particular clip, he asked what was her best hopes from the session, and she went into a bunch of what we call problem talk. Now, the other thing that I want you to pay attention to is people would often say to me, like, I don't like solution-focused brief therapy because you ignore the problem. Adam is not ignoring the problem. He heard it. But he's really interested in developing a contract or a purpose for this conversation. So when she said all of that, he said, wow, that's a lot. And then he continued to ask his question. So our clients don't feel ignored. In fact, quite the contrary. But we are not ignoring anything. In fact, we're very empathetic, and we're very curious. But we're also very careful not to amplify the problem. If someone talks to you about a problem, just by investigating the problem, problems have a way of being amplified. I'll give you a really good example. If anybody out there has a young child, this will make sense to you, but whenever you see a young child, and typically a boy, like, 4 or 5 years old, something like that, and the child is playing, like running around the room playing, not paying any attention whatsoever to the adults in the room, just kind of playing as young kids do. When the child is running around the room, and they bang their head against the wall, or they bang their head on the corner of a table, or they bang their knee on a chair, the very first thing the children do is they look to their parents. And if the parents continue business as usual, the child will typically just rub the injured area and then continue to go about playing. But if the parents say, oh my God, look at your knee, are you okay? The children begin to cry because we've just amplified the problem. When I was a kid, I actually saw this happen in real time, in a very real way, and if I hadn't been there, I wouldn't have believed it. But I used to be in the Boy Scouts, and we were learning whittling with wood. We were learning woodworking, and we had this big, sharp knife that those of you familiar with the movie Rambo mostly looked like that Rambo knife, and we were carving this wood. Well, the person that I was sitting next to, I turned and looked at him, and I saw red dripping from his hand onto the ground. And he was acting as if nothing was bothering him. So I just looked at him for a minute, almost in shock that he hadn't noticed this. So after a couple of seconds, I tapped him on the shoulder and I said, I think you cut yourself. And at this time, I'm probably about 10 years old maybe. I said, I think you've cut yourself. And he kind of smiled. He looked down at his hand, and then he began to experience the pain. So once it was outside of his perception, it wasn't an issue until I pointed his mind to it, and then it became amplified to something he could attend to. Now, something like that, physical injury, of course we want to pay attention to it, but in psychotherapy, when you're using solution-focused brief therapy, we want to amplify the solution, we want to amplify the hope, and in this particular phase of the therapy, we want to amplify the desires of the client. So we're very specifically interested in what does this person want from psychotherapy. The next thing that we're going to do to build upon this, now that we know what the client's best hopes are from the talking, is we're now going to be very interested in what we call resources. So there's going to be a period of something called resource talk. And it's focused on highlighting the client's resources. Now, we're not going to ask clients questions about their resources. We're just going to assume the resources are there. Like, it's very different to say something like, are there any things you're good at? Because that sounds like there may not be. We're going to say things like, tell me what you're good at. You see the difference in are there things you're good at and tell me what you're good at? Because we want to highlight those resources in real time so they play a role in the way you think and view yourself in this conversation. And we want you to take credit for those resources, so that things are going to be based on observations and actions. And it's a time for me, the clinician, to be taught by the client. Never forget, we all went to school to become a psychotherapist. We have to allow our clients to teach us to be their psychotherapist. So even though I've been in school for a gazillion years, and I've learned a lot about psychotherapy, and I've been mentored and have trained with some of the brightest minds in the world, I've never met Steve before. So I have to put myself in a position to allow Steve to teach me to be his therapist. So I want you to watch a little bit of our discussion and how this resource talk kind of plays itself out. And then I'm going to point to you as to why I'm asking the questions I'm asking and what I'm listening for as I go through this process.
At this point, so you said recently, told you how recent? About 2 months. Where are you from? Met. Yes. Awesome. Good. Well, before we chat about that, can I get to know you a bit? You bet. That'd be all right? Yeah. Where are you from? I'm originally from Southwest Colorado. Southwest Colorado? Yeah. Okay. And what brought you to this area? Work. And what do you do? Well, I used to be a sheet metal operator. Okay. For about 30 years, but then my health started failing. So I have cirrhosis of the liver, and the doctors recently told me it was terminal, and life just sucks at this point. So you said recently, told you how recent? About 2 months ago. Wow. And you did this for 30 years? Yeah. Prior to that? Yeah. Did you enjoy it? Yeah, it was okay. I mean, it was a job, That's about all I really cared about it, I guess. Really? Yeah. That's a long time to stick with just the job. What made you just stick with it for so long, 30 years? Well, I was married, and, my wife and I, we had our kids kind of early, so I needed to do the job to support the family. Mm-hmm. So, and are you always that dedicated of a guy that something was just a job to you could stick to for 30 years to take care of the family and the wife? And you made this decision when you were a young guy, like you were always that dedicated of a guy that, I guess so. I never thought about it, I suppose.
So as I'm listening to him talk, problems have a way of just coming up. Like, people we're much better talking about problems than we are our successes. And as I listened to him talk, I could hear him say things like, I've been doing this job for 30 years, which in and of itself is amazing to me, to be able to stick to a job for that long. And then he describes it as just a job. Now, you can hear, one of my mentors used to say, almost every question you ask has an undertone of compliment or insult. And you could hear me give him a compliment by saying, have you always been this dedicated of a guy? So my question has in its, encapsulated in the question is a compliment that I think he's dedicated. And as he goes on, he accepts the compliment then by saying, I hadn't thought of it that way. Now, here's a guy that's in a pretty difficult spot in his life. He's been told he's got cirrhosis of the liver. He's been, things are really tough. And he says life kind of sucks right now. But you can see shifts already beginning to happen as he accepts, I'm a dedicated guy and not just this guy with this insurmountable problem, right? Does that make sense? Well, hopefully it makes sense, I'll say that. So I want to show a video of Adam doing a similar process with his client. Let me cue up the video here.
Have you ever been back to Mexico?
Yeah, I visit.
I do. When I feel like my parents are kind of coming at me, how do I manage that? If we have that kind of conversation, you would say, okay, that was good. I'm glad I went.
Yeah.
Okay. And then if I am going to kind of do something strange for a minute, if I take all that and I just set it over here and say we're going to come back to it.
Mm-hmm.
But if I just want to take a minute to get to know you and who you are and those kind of things, you said you're Susie. Can you tell me how old you are?
I'm 17.
17.
Yeah. My mom and my dad are Latino parents.
Okay.
They migrated here when they were younger.
Where are they migrated from?
Mexico.
Mexico.
Yeah.
And have you ever been back to Mexico?
Yeah, I visit my grandparents sometimes when I go down there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good. Do you get to go very often?
When I was a lot younger, I did, but now that I'm older, I don't really have time, with sports and everything.
Uh-huh.
Well, when I was playing sports and stuff, I didn't really have time because that took most of my time.
Okay. And what sports do you play?
I loved soccer, so I played soccer.
Okay. You good?
Yes.
What position do you play?
I started when I was younger as forward, and as I got older, I moved to defense.
Okay. Do you have a preference?
I personally prefer midfield because I get to play both.
Yep.
So.
Okay. Very good. And if I asked your teammates, would they say you were good?
I hope so.
Good. All right. And so, besides soccer, what else do you like to do?
I don't know. I try to just focus on sports because that pretty much helps me with everything. But since I moved, I haven't found anything that really helps me. So it's been really, really hard for me.
Okay. So when you moved, you kind of left soccer behind. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of contributing to what's going on.
Yeah.
When you were playing soccer, you said you used that and that kind of helped you cope with things.
Yeah.
What was helpful? Why did that work?
I feel it was because I could let.
Okay, so remember, everything you say has an undertone of compliment or insult, and you just heard Adam compliment her by saying when you were in soccer, how was that helpful? Because the assumption is when you were in soccer, it was in fact helping you. He didn't say, did it help you? Because the answer to that could be no. He's implying that her life is, in some ways, this problem is fixable because it was once fixed. And once you start asking people about what they do with their lives that causes them enjoyment, you will see that the mood begins to elevate. And it elevates in a way that changes the remainder of the conversation. Because you start to kind of awaken those parts of their brains that remind them that this problem is not insurmountable because I've once been able to conquer it. I once had something in my life that caused me to go without this particular problem. And you can hear Adam, and hopefully you can hear with myself as well, we're learning how to make our questions personable. People always, maybe the number one question I get asked when I'm training solution-focused brief therapy is, but what do you do if the client can't answer your questions? Well, remember, we're very careful with the words can't and want. Because if someone can't answer my question, it usually means I haven't built a good enough question for them to answer. If I ask really personalized questions, people are much more able to answer it. So Adam is learning personal information about her that will allow him to do a good job of building questions. Like he's learned that she likes sports, and particularly soccer. He's learned that she likes midfield because she can play both a little offense and a little defense. He's learned that she's originally from Mexico. He's going to go on to learn her parents' names. So really good questions sound like, so when you're at your very best, what would your mom and dad notice versus just what would someone who knows you notice? Because one of them is much more personalized than the other, and people are much more likely to answer personalized questions. And then the last thing is the eliciting future details. This is where most people are familiar with the miracle question, and it's nothing more than a realization of the client's best hopes from the work. The task is for me to help the client consider those best hopes in as much detail as possible. The more detail, the clearer the picture, and thus the more likely the client is to make changes. So you're going to hear I'm going to jump forward a little bit in my conversation with Steve. So I now know what his best hopes are as he wants to wake up feeling good. Now, this is a really difficult session because this person has an illness that is not, medicinally curable, and certainly not curable by a psychotherapist. But I have to help this person think about a world when they are at their very best, whatever their version of best is given the health circumstances. But I want you to pay attention to the questions I'm asking, and going back to the previous slides about language being reality, the different parts of the brain that we're triggering to become active.
It kind of changed, and you woke up one morning and you had that energy. So I'm going to ask you an unusual question. Okay. And if somehow your life kind of changed and you woke up one morning and you had that energy that you were referring to, and somehow your life had gotten better, good, what would be the very, very, very first thing you would notice upon waking up that would tell you, I'm somehow a different version of myself? In spite of this illness, I'm somehow a different version of myself. What would be the very first thing you would notice?
I wouldn't be throwing up.
What would you be doing?
Oh, I suppose I'd be able to get out of bed by myself.
And when you woke up and you're still laying in bed, what would be the first indicator that this might be a day where I could get up by myself? What would be the very first clue that would kind of set you into, like, this might be a day I could pull this off?
I wouldn't have cramping in my stomach, and my legs would work better than they do right now.
Okay. And if you didn't have...
I always need a walker.
Sure.
Everywhere I go.
Sure. And if you didn't have the cramping in your stomach, what would you describe the feeling of your stomach being without the cramping?
Calm, I guess.
And would you be pleased?
Oh, absolutely.
That this calm.
Yeah, yeah.
And you said your legs would be working better.
Mm-hmm.
And how would your legs let you know that on this day they somehow could do it? How would your legs let you know that on this day we somehow could do it?
There would be blood in there? I don't know how else to say it.
But how would they clue you into the fact that we know that our body is sick and we're struggling with this illness, but on this day we just might be able to kind of move around a bit? How would your legs clue you into the fact that
they'd be able to support my weight?
And how would you test them? So now that you're laying in bed and you're realizing...
I would swing them over the bed, and I would put weight on them, and they would support me.
And which foot would you trust first? Which foot would you...
On my right foot.
And once you noticed that your right foot could do it,
mm-hmm.
and maybe it couldn't do it in the way it did it 30 years ago, but it's doing it to a satisfactory level to you, you would then put your left foot.
Mm-hmm.
And how would you stand up in a way that rewarded your legs in that way, that since your legs are kind of helping you, you're going to help them? How would you stand up in a way that would allow you to show your legs that you're helping them support you?
I would put my hands on the bed, and I would push off the bed, and I would put the weight on my legs.
And once you realized that you were doing it, what would be a sign that this was somehow right for you? Like, how would you know that I just did this thing and it's somehow right for me? It's somehow kind of noting that this is a different today.
I know. I guess my balance would be back on its own.
So, do you see what I mean when I say we're after the most minutest of details? And one of the reasons we do that is, we have no way of knowing which detail is going to unlock the client's pathway towards success. So we want them all, because one of them is going to be the one that unlocks a pathway to change. Now, like I said, this is a very difficult session because we're talking about a terminal illness. But what we're really talking about is him being his very, very best as he's dealing with the terminal illness. Obviously, I can't do and or say anything's going to take the illness away, but I can talk to him in such a way that's going to cause him to function at his best as this illness kind of takes over his body. So I'll play a little bit of Adam, because Adam's going to ask the question, this kind of miracle question, in a much more traditional way. And I just want you guys to hear that a bit, and then we'll start taking some questions.
I think off the top of my head at the moment.
Okay. So if I can ask you maybe kind of a strange question, if we do what we do and we have kind of this meaningful conversation and we talk about managing your parents and kind of managing all these feelings that you're having and brainstorming some possible ideas about how to cope with that and how to feel better, and then you leave here and you go throughout your day, and maybe you probably have some homework that you're gonna do, probably think about your old friends, maybe contact them, probably do some Facebook or something like that to text them, and then it comes tonight and you do your normal routine. You get ready for bed, and you're just doing your regular routine, and somehow tonight you manage to fall asleep, and you sleep well, right? And I don't know if you sleep well normally or not, but tonight you do. And while you're sleeping, there's kind of this change that happens, and this change that happens isn't a change that says, we moved back to Vail, or all of my friends moved here to Denver, right? It's not that kind of a change. The change that you experience is all of a sudden you feel different. You feel like you can cope with being here in Denver. You feel like you can manage kind of this overwhelming sense of, you said depression, I think, this idea of you feel like you can cope with that differently. It may not even be gone, but this changes. There's something different about you, and you can cope differently. And you feel like, maybe my mom and my dad could understand a little bit about this. Maybe we could have a conversation that says, I can explain to them how I'm feeling, and they could help me, right? So it's this kind of a change of just, there's something different here. And you wake up, and the really tricky part about this is this change happened while you're asleep. So you have no idea that it happened. You couldn't know. Could you tell me, when you wake up tomorrow morning and this change has happened, what might be the very first tiny little sign that would say something's different, something has changed? Can you tell me what you might notice?
Now you can see in the way he asked that question, he's very, very focused on the presence of her best hopes. And he's very, very focused on making sure he gets answers that are actually doable, which is why he said things like, and it's not the type of miracle that made all your friends move here, because that's not doable. So it's a type of miracle that makes you able to cope with your current circumstances, because that's actually what her best hopes are. And because he asked the question with such specificity and with such, focus on her desires, the answer is so usable to him as a clinician.
That I wake up and I don't argue with my parents.
Okay.
I think.
Okay. And I'm going to get to there in just a second, but if I pull back a minute and I say, even before that, you're still maybe in bed, and you're laying there and you just notice something's different. What might you notice if you're still in bed?
I'm excited to go to school.
So they spend the remainder of the session, so what is this, is about 11 minutes, 12 minutes in, and they go on for 50 minutes, just flushing out these details, because remember, we're after every single detail, because we never know which one is going to unlock the pathway towards success. So, I think we have about 20 minutes left, or 15 minutes left. Are there any questions? And I might need the the helpers from therapy sites to help me go through the questions.
Yes, thank you, Elliott. We are going to get to questions in just a moment, but before we do, my name's Tracy, and I wanted to say thank you to everyone on behalf of Therapy Sites for joining us today. And as a thank you for attending the webinar today, we do have a special offer, and that's for the first 20 people to contact us. We'd like to offer you 2 months free of a live website. And that's not just any website, that's one that can help you streamline your practice, along with unlimited support, and 6 months free listing in Psychology Today, which is a huge power listing and helpful for link building and SEO and ways to help you get found online. So that's 2 months free of a website, 6 months free in Psychology Today. Combined, that's a $300 value. That's all yours, absolutely no risk, no contracts. Now, this is for new customers only, and it's a great opportunity to test drive a full website and see what it can do for you. Again, this is for the first 20 people, and if you are a current customer, give us a call. We can give you a one-on-one consultation in regards to your SEO, and maybe we'll have a little something extra for you on that. But for the first 20, to take advantage of that 2 months free, just give us a call if you'd like to take advantage of that at 866-288-2771. Email us at webinar@therapysites.com, or go ahead and send me a quick text at 303-990-1331. So with Therapy Sites, right out of the box, you're getting a really great professional-looking website capable of fulfilling all your marketing and practice management needs so that you can really focus your time and energy on things like implementing the solution-focused brief therapy. And these websites are easily customizable, so you can add picture, video, articles, anything you need in minutes. And in case you are having any issues or looking for something to do a little bit more advanced as far as customization, we do have a dedicated support team to help with it about just any requests. And along with our support team, we have a great search team as well to help you identify your keywords, title tags, and really get you found online. And on top of that, I mentioned we do have things like e-newsletter and appointment calendars so that you can really streamline your practice and provide clients with resources they're looking for in order to easily book appointments and keep them coming back. At Therapy Sites, we really love this stuff. So again, the first 20 people, just shoot me a text at 303-990-1331. Send me an email at webinar@therapysites.com, or give us a call at 866-288-2771, and we'll be more than happy to set you up with a full website for 2 months. Now, with that said, I want to give a big thanks again, and I'm going to hand this back over to Denise to go over all your questions that have come through.
Thank you, Tracy and Elliott. And yes, Elliott, we did have a lot of questions come through, so let's go ahead and start tackling these. The first question is from Deborah. What question would I ask students for grief and losses? These are post-secondary students on a First Nations community.
We would treat grief and loss. First of all, I want everybody to know that solution-focused brief therapy, because I'm sure the sessions you just watched, and remember, they're simulated sessions. In my trainings, I try to use real sessions, but because of this being internet content, I just was not comfortable doing that, nor did I have permission of my clients to put it on the internet. I just have permission to use it in trainings. This work is supported by research. Solution-focused brief therapy is an evidence-based approach, according to SAMHSA, NAMI, and all the regulatory boards. So we're going to ask questions like, what are your best hopes from the therapy? Now, very often, people are going to say things like, I really wish that my mom hadn't passed away, or my brother hadn't passed away, or whomever it was. But I can't do that in therapy. So we have to focus on something that's actually doable in therapy. And I'm working with a client now who's lost somebody, and her best hopes was that as their loved one looked down on them, they would be proud of them. So our conversation became, how would you live a life in a way that caused the person who's looking down from above to be pleased with the way you were living your life? And that adds purpose to the way they were living now that they've lost this very important person to them. So the short answer is, we'd start off by asking what their best hopes were from the therapy. Not what are their best hopes, because their best hopes are that the person would be alive, but what are their best hopes from the therapy? And then we would work from there.
Great, thank you, Elliott. And I'm getting a couple of questions about how to contact you and how to contact Therapy Sites. Would you mind moving to the contact slide, the last slide of the presentation, please?
No, there you go.
Awesome. Just a couple more, that way they can have contacts for both. We're just getting a couple of questions here for that information. But the next question for you, Elliott, is how do you get the client to talk about reasons for change when your client is in therapy because he or she is mandated to be there?
No, that's a good question. Mandated therapy is a very common thing. In the early part of my career, I worked with a court program where, nearly 100% of my clients were mandated into therapy. But we have to focus on why they're there. So what are your best hopes from therapy? And people would say things like, I'm not here because I want to be here. My probation officer is making me come, that sort of thing. But what we're really focused on is something made you comply. When the probation officer told you to go to therapy, something made you comply. So now that you're here, what do you hope would happen so that you're not wasting your time? And shockingly, people will easily start talking about what changes they want to see in their life just because they're here. I tell all of my clients, mandated or not, and I work with teenagers, and almost all of those are mandated because they're told to come by their parent. And I tell all of my parents and things like that, if you can get your child here, my job is to have a meaningful conversation with them so they stay engaged with the process. So that's what I would say to people who are mandated into therapy, is we have to have a meaningful conversation with them that's connected to what drove them to comply with the person that mandated the therapy. And shockingly, they will tell you not only what motivated them to comply to that, but now that they're here, what changes they'd like to see take place.
Great, thanks, Elliott. And the next question for you is, what do you do when a client believes he feels less depressed if his goal is something that might harm someone?
We would never pursue a goal that we weren't ethically confident in. So again, I'll just use teenagers as an example. But teenagers will often say stuff like, I'd feel less depressed if my parents would leave me alone and let me smoke marijuana or smoke spice or whatever, drug it is. Well, I couldn't ethically support that. So I'd have to say things, and you heard Adam do it. In the way he crafted the question, he was removing potential answers by saying stuff like, and not the type of miracle that, ... So I'd say stuff to the client like, and suppose something happened that caused you to do something that was right for you and didn't put anybody else at risk. What would you notice? So you see how I would have to remove the risk factor to other people because I wouldn't feel right pursuing an end that was somehow harmful or even unhealthy to someone else.
Great. Thank you, Elliott. And Tracy, there's a couple of questions coming in for you about the contact information for therapy sites so that you can take advantage of that 2 months free. Would you mind sharing that?
Yes, for sure. To take advantage of that 2 months free that I had mentioned, just give us a call at 866-288-2771. You can email us at webinar@therapysites.com. or send me a quick text at 303-990-1331. Any of those three ways, and we'll make sure you're in that top 20 so that you can really take advantage of that 2 months free and get a live website up and going for your practice today.
Thank you, Tracy. And Elliott, how do you keep the client focused on the future instead of going back to the problem or past problems? I feel like I'm interrupting them.
Well, we would say it's okay to interrupt them, but we ask them quite well. Let me rephrase that. We would say it's okay to interrupt them, but we don't want to make them feel like they're not being heard. So if a client tells us, I've got this issue, I'm having a hard time getting over a situation that happened in the past. Earlier this morning, I had someone in my office that was having a hard time getting over a husband that left her. But it's okay for us to say things like, and if you noticed yourself getting over it in a way that was right for you, what would you begin to see happen? Do you see how that takes the past idea of dealing with this past husband leaving her and transposes it into the future? So now she's focused on what she would notice herself doing as she starts getting over it. And by the way, whenever we're using words like getting over it, those words must come from the client, or else they're going to feel like we're forcing them to change when they're not ready to change.
Great, thank you. And how can you help the client to keep the positive talk and focused solution mind out of the counseling room?
Can you repeat that?
Yeah. How can you help the client to keep the positive talk and focused solution mind out of the counseling room?
I don't understand. How can I keep them focused on solution talk and out of the counseling realm?
Yes.
Okay. Our questions are crucial to helping the client stay focused in the solution talk, and to us, that is counseling. We think that is in the counseling realm, is helping the client envision a future where change would be possible.
Okay. What books do you recommend on solution-focused brief therapy for the practitioner?
Um, well, that's a really good question, and to be honest with you, and it's going to sound like I'm being cheesy, but they're all kind of good. And I probably should have mentioned this earlier, but I've actually written three: The Art of Solution-Focused Therapy, Solution Building in Couples Therapy, and then The Solution-Focused Marriage. But when I went about learning this approach, I really just got them and read them all. My favorite, other than the ones I wrote, are Interviewing for Solutions by Peter DeYoung and Insoo Kim Berg, and More Than Miracles and More Than Miracles is the last book Steve DeShazer contributed to before he passed away. And it's got a host, Yvonne Dolan, Eric McCollum, Harry Corman, and a few others are the noted authors of that book. But I really think you can't go wrong. But just personally, my two favorites were More Than Miracles and Interviewing for Solutions.
Great. Thank you. And do you have any specific tips for working with children who may not have the awareness to offer details as willingly?
Yeah, actually, what we have found is children, because their imagination is so strongly intact, children are more able to give us details. Because when you ask children, like suppose you woke up to, like I was working with a kid a couple weeks ago, what's your favorite superhero? And the kid was all excited, and he said, my favorite superhero is Aquaman. And why do you like Aquaman? Because he can breathe underwater and talk to fish. And if you could be a superhero and have your own power, what would it be? And he said, I would have a magic boomerang. What would this boomerang be? And suppose you woke up one day and you actually had this magic boomerang, and it was somehow helpful to everybody. What would you start to notice? This kid spewed details and could have just gone on forever, because children aren't hampered by our adult thinking, and their imaginations are totally intact. That kid came back to therapy 2 weeks later, and the parents couldn't believe the change, because he was just, in essence, kids can go into this imaginary world and they just start playing. So in essence, he spent 2 weeks, acting as this superhero and completely changed everything in his life.
Great. Thank you, Elliott. And we just had another couple of questions come in about how to contact therapy sites. And if you just send us an email to webinar@therapysites.com, we'll be able to help you out and take advantage of that 2-month free offer. Simple email, webinar@therapysites.com. And we're getting close to time, but I just wanted to ask a couple more questions for Elliott. This one is from Karen. Besides the miracle question and the resource question, what other questions are important?
We think I would say all questions. Let me see. So there are things called relational questions, where you ask things like, what would your partner notice about you? What would your boss notice about you? Exception questions. When are there times when this problem somehow doesn't show up? Let me see. Relational questions, exception finding questions. There's such a whole list of questions. If you send me an email, I'll gladly send you a thorough list of types of questions, and then point you in the direction where you can find books that have lists of questions and things like that.
Great. Thank you. And we have quite a few questions that are still coming in. How do you get all the info that you need, like medications, abuse, etc.?
On our intake form. So on my intake form, I'll ask about medications. We will ask about safety and making sure the client is not at risk, things like that. And also, while I'm doing the therapy, I'm also kind of simultaneously making sure, and this is true for any form of therapy, whether it's solution-focused or my original methodology of training was cognitive behavioral therapy. And it's true across methodologies is you're kind of simultaneously doing therapy and assessing for this person's safety. If a client can't find enough hope to answer my future focused questions, I know that this person may not be safe, and I need to start doing an assessment of their safety. And at that point, if I think someone is not safe, then therapy has to stop, whether you're doing solution focused therapy or CB2 or whatever, and you have to do a risk assessment / safety planning, that sort of thing, to make sure someone's safe. Someone who's intimately, in danger, therapy is not appropriate for that person, and you need to stop the therapy and make sure you help this person become safe.
Great, thank you. And this question is from Jason. Have activities been used and found useful as sessions progress with clients?
I would want to know what you mean by activities. We are very much talk therapists, so if by activities you mean like bringing in activities into therapy like art and games and cards and that sort of thing.
Yeah, he was talking about games.
Okay. There are, we don't use those things. When I say we, by the way, I'm referring to me and Adam and a few others on our teaching and research team. But there are people, and I'm thinking in particular about a group in Australia, and they use these cards called Kid Skills. And on these cards are a list of kind of positive traits that people have within their personalities, and they use them in their training. They actually recently sent me a copy of these cards, and actually they're quite nice. My training is very much about talk therapy. But whenever you use games like this, you just have to make sure it's orientated towards client strengths and resources and not towards problem. But the short answer to your question is yes, there are people who do that. And if you look online, you'll be able to find them. And if you send me an email, I can point you in the direction to find those types of games.
Great, thank you. And we are at the top of the hour, so we only have time for just a few more questions. Elliott, do you mind moving the slide? I think it's 2 more slides to the end. Contact us. It has both of our information on that. That way people can reach out to both of us if they need to. But the next couple of questions, let's see here. How long are brief therapy sessions typically last?
My sessions last about as long as traditional psychotherapy, an hour, 50 minutes, somewhere between an hour and 50 minutes. Okay.
And have you ever experienced a client getting frustrated about focusing on the positive, even if you personalize your questions? So the other question is, how do you redirect these clients who really are resistant to focusing on the positive and setting their present problems aside for a while?
That is such a good question, and I often do 2 and 3 day trainings, and I would hope you would come to one of those trainings. I mean, this approach is really simple, but it's really hard to learn how to do, and you'd have to go get really good training and learn how to do it. Now, I've been doing this for 10 years, and I've never had a single client get frustrated with being directed towards talking about positive, future-focused things. But the answer to how that happens is really technical, and it requires practice. People will participate in this type of therapy if they're finding it helpful and if they're not feeling ignored. And I have to ask questions in such a way that's going to allow the person to feel heard, but yet I'm curious about something else. You see what I mean? Like I hear what you're saying, but gosh, I'm really curious about this. And that's a skill that requires practice and honing.
Great. Thank you, Elliott. And this is going to be the last question that we have time to take today. But if you have any more questions, whether it's for Elliott or if it's for us at Therapy Sites, please reach out to us. Our information is up there on the screen. You can join Elliott's mailing list and receive information from him regularly. And you can give us a call or give us an email and try to take that 2 months offer and see how it really works for you. So the last question for you, Elliott, is, does solution-focused therapy approach, does it tend to have to be a single session?
No. It's often not just a single session. We stay really focused on asking questions about each session because we just assume each time we talk there's the potential to be the last time we talk. But more often than not, you're going to see people more than once, for sure.
And how many sessions is typical?
It really depends on the solution-focused therapist. Like my average is less than 4. One of my colleagues, it's around 6.5, like somewhere between 6 and 7. But every single therapist you ask, solution-focused therapist would be different. But I would say somewhere between 3 and 8, maybe.
Great, thank you. And that is all the questions that we do have time for today. But I just want to give a special thank you to you, Elliott, Connie. We really are honored to have you with us here today. And for everybody who's attended, to learn more about the solution-focused brief therapy, check out his new association, the Association for Solution-Focused Practitioners, and take a minute and join his mailing list. That way you can receive information directly to your inbox. And on behalf of Therapy Sites, we're looking forward to hearing from you to take advantage of that 2-month free offer. Send us an email at webinar@therapysites.com. And again, thank you all so much for being here today. Have a wonderful afternoon.